So let's go back to the code, after we've, declared those game objects and we've, clicked and dragged them into the proper places. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a whole bunch of strings. Now, strings are different from game objects because strings store, they store like text data. They store things like letters, words, that kind of thing. We can't use a game object really to store those things. We have to use a string. All right, so we're going to use a different naming convention because these are private. Variables. What private variables mean is that they won't show up in the inspector in Unity, right? Because like all these game objects, they're public, so we could see them in Unity. These guys, can't see them. All right, so we're gonna make our third private string. This is animal. And our final private string is drink. Okay, and then we're going to need a string to hold the URL address that we will eventually get. Now, right now we don't have that, so I'm just going to leave it as some empty quotation marks, and then we will get that stuff later. All right, but yeah, you can see we have all of our variables listed. So next thing we can do is we can make our submit function. That's the function that the button is going to call whenever we send data. So we're gonna call this public. That's not how we spell public. Public void. We're gonna call this send. No, actually submit is fine. Submit, and we need parentheses at the end, and hit enter, and then curly brackets. Okay, now, we declared these string variables, right? But they don't hold any data at the moment. Right now, it's just saying, hey, I want these variables to, I want these variables and I want them to hold text, but I need to actually put the text in there. And we somehow need to get, the text from these game objects into these string variables. So this is how we're gonna do this. First, we're gonna type name, right? And that calls on that first, string variable that we made. We're gonna say it equals input name. Now, input name is the name of the game object, remember, dot get component. And we're gonna type in these little alligator mouths. I know they have an actual name. I just can't remember it right now, so I'm just gonna call them alligator mouths. And within those alligator mouths, we're gonna type input field. Then we need to do closed little parentheses after that, dot text, and don't forget your little semicolon. And what this does is, it goes into the game object and get component. It's like, hey, find the part of the component that is, the input field. And then it grabs the text that has been put, into that input field. So whatever your user typed in there, it's gonna grab that, it's gonna store that text data into our name variable. And we're gonna do that for the other variables. So we'll start with color, and that is gonna be, color dot get component, little alligator mouths. Oh, that's not how we type. Input field, little close parentheses, dot text. All right, and I'm just double checking to make sure I got that right. Now, since the next one also follows the same convention, you can just copy that line, hit enter, go to the next line. And obviously we're gonna change the names. So we're gonna make this animal, and it is going to be, so it says animal dot get component input field dot text. Now, drink is going to be a little bit more difficult because it has a toggle menu, so there's a lot of different things within it. So this line is going to be a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to do my best to explain it. So we're going to say drink is equal to, and we're going to say the toggle group, which is drink options dot get first active toggle, close parentheses, dot transform dot get child, parentheses. And we're going to type a 1 within those parentheses, and I will explain why in a little bit. Put a period outside those parentheses, get component, alligator mouths, text, and then outside of the alligator mouth, do closed parentheses, dot text. Okay. Now, like I said, this is a little bit more complicated. I mean, it's not a simple, object.get component. There are quite a few things we have to go through first, right? So the drink options, obviously refers to the toggle menu. Sorry, it occurs to me I didn't actually drag the toggle menu into the drink option slot, so that's what I just did. So what that does is it goes to this game object first, right? And then the dot get first active toggle obviously is just, hey, whichever one of these toggles is active, go to that one. And since we have our toggle group set up so that only one option can be selected at a time, it goes straight to, the thing that we have selected. So let's say I select, the milk toggle. Okay, so it goes to the milk toggle, the dot transform dot get child 1. So these little objects underneath milk toggle, those are its children. Now, looking at these two, you would think, okay, label is in the second place, so the 1 must refer to background for some reason, but that's not what we want. Well, I mean, Unity and a lot of other programming languages, they don't start counting at 1, right? They start counting at 0. So while we might say, oh yeah, the label is in the second place, Unity, starts from 0, and so it considers background to be in the 0th place, and label is actually in the first place. So that is important to remember, when you're counting stuff in Unity. Just remember, it starts with 0, so your count is going to be off by 1, essentially. So that's why we have 1 within the parentheses, because that refers to the label. Then the get component text. Well, if we go to label, we look at its components in the inspector, we see it has the text component, right? And that then grabs the text that we have, entered there. So that's what that line does.